hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Activating Greatness, the show where we dig into what it really takes to lead with purpose, inspire performance, and create lasting impact. As always, I'm your host, Alec McChesney. In every episode, we sit down with leaders, thinkers, and change makers who are unlocking potential in themselves, their teams, and their organizations. Here, we talk about the real stuff: leadership that drives culture, strategy that creates momentum, and the mindset that turns good intentions into game-changing results. Because greatness, it's not a title, it's a choice. It's something you activate every single day. So thank you for listening, for showing up, and for being part of a community of leaders who refuse to settle for good enough. Now, I am so excited for today's episode. I told Parry when we met last week that I was fangirling a little bit because I've been a fan of yours for maybe 5 years on LinkedIn as a platform. You're the founder and CEO of Crackle PR. And I am really thankful for you taking some time out of your day, but also the way that you lead and the way that you communicate and do what I would refer to as leading from the front, the back, the middle, in the weeds, as a leader, all of the above. But before we get into today's episode and some questions, curious for those who maybe aren't familiar with you, which I think would be shocking with the 79,000 followers on LinkedIn, why don't you give a little bit of an introduction and your background to what led you here today?
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. And I'm always pleased to join a podcast that has the word greatness right in the title, because that's aspirational and that's what I aspire to be.
I love it.
Parry Headrick, founder of Crackle PR. I started the agency right in the bowels of the pandemic when everybody was staring at the walls of their house thinking, what in the hell are we going to do next? Riots in the street, couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything. And it really just felt like it was a forced moment of reflection. And prior to that, I had spent about 20 years growing a couple of the largest privately held tech PR agencies in the country. I was VP of marketing of Shift Communications, which was, 20 plus million or so before it was acquired the first time. And I also was vice president of marketing for Matter Communications, which was, again, 20-ish million dollars at that point in time. But then I thought during the pandemic, it was like, wow, what if I could build an agency that was devoid of the things I didn't love about the big agency life and was more of a true north, only work on good companies kind of gig. And I kicked that tire around in my brain for a little bit. And then I contacted somebody I'd worked with at a prior agency. And I was like, what do you think about this, man? And he was like, I'm all in. And I was like, okay, there's two of us that are all in on this concept of working only with demonstrably good companies doing good things. That sounds like enough for me. So we hung up the shingle. And then the intervening almost 5 years now, we've really been doing a great job of attracting really quality clients from all rounds of funding to publicly traded concerns. Have about 20-ish clients, have about 15 PR pros. And we're not looking to get like big for the sake of getting big. We kind of enjoy growing and scaling intelligently. Like, we do want to continue to grow, but not at all costs. And we won't work with every client because we're pretty particular about who we partner up with these days, which is one of the luxuries of starting your own gig after 20 years in the trenches.
I love it. And I love it because of the theme that has been recurring on the Activating Greatness podcast, which is understanding who we want to be, but also understanding who we don't want to be. And I had a CEO in the life sciences on yesterday and posted it today on LinkedIn about how she made it very clear to private equity and to her team, I don't care about getting big. I care about getting it right, getting the right clients, getting the right people internally, and then doing the right thing for their audience, which in the clinical trial world is patients. And so those are the stories that we're trying to tell. And you've been very vocal on LinkedIn about traditional PR agencies and how it's always been done. And, one of the things that I know, if I'm scrolling down and I see the little fist and the comment, this is the way, that, hey, that's a Parry post or somebody was trying to poach it. So I'm just curious, what led you to thinking so differently throughout these 20 years? Because as somebody who was in the institutions themselves and leading them, what were some of those triggers or signals that said, hey, there is a better way to do this. There's a way that I think would make me happier and the people that I work with and work for me happier as well.
Yeah, I think in some ways starting Crackle was an act of contrition because while I worked at these larger agencies. And I had, don't get me wrong, I had a really successful career, had a wonderful time, met a lot of wonderful friends, met my wife. There's a lot of really good things that came out of those experiences. But I was really sort of at the mercy of revenue at all costs.
Yeah.
And so everything we did was predicated on how does that add more money to the bottom line. And so when that is your sort of true north operationally, you'll cover your nose and work with clients you don't love. You'll tolerate the shenanigans and bullshit of tyrants because you don't want their retainers to go away. Yeah. You'll compromise, I think, some of your integrity and some of your values, as long as it's not overt and just wildly crazy. So in other words, you want the money, you'll take the money. And especially if you're in my role where I'm tasked with bringing in revenue for the agency, I can't necessarily be very particular about who comes on board when it's all about the revenue. So do I regret those experiences? No. But what I did know is that if I started my own, there were some things that I just pledged I was never going to do. And I can give you a litany of examples, but a couple of the small ones are, for example, I spent my entire career tracking my time in 15-minute increments. Yep. Can you imagine how soul sucking that is and how counter to creativity that is, where you're like in a state of constant paralysis that you're going to forget what you did the last 15 minutes. So that's one thing I just was categorically like, we are not doing that. And the other thing was that we're not doing hourly billing, which is absurd, especially in the day of AI, where it takes, 5 minutes, what used to take 5 weeks. How do you justify that hourly spend? Right. So we moved to a value-based business model, which I think is paying me and my team for the, 10 to 20,000 hours that we put in to learn our craft versus the 10 hours that we put in, looking at your stuff. Yeah. That's just another example. And then lastly, it's like, we're fully remote, built intentionally to be that way. I'd rather pay talented people than throw that money into offices in swanky Manhattan or San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, I'm able to hire anybody literally all over the world instead of just people within a 30-mile radius of my office. Yeah. And I think that's pretty liberating too. And then finally, I'll just add to that, I'm not looking to monitor your bathroom breaks. I hire really smart people. I set them up with what they need for success, and then I get the hell out of the way unless they need me. And that model has proven to be successful in the sense that in the PR industry writ large, the average turnover rate is 25% per year. 1 in 4 people per year leaves PR agencies, which is just a constant churn. It's super expensive to replace that talent. And we've had 3 people leave the agency in 5 years, and we're still friends with all of them. So on top of that, our turnover rate for clients is wildly low because we tend to put out into the world things we get back. And so by talking on LinkedIn, for an example, about what we do, what we don't do, what our ethos is, what we like, what we dislike, what's true, what's false, and just being a truth teller on that platform, by the time people reach out to me, they're already 75% of the way to closing a deal because they know already who I am and how I think. Yeah. So I'm giving you a lot there. I'll pause because this is not me rambling podcast. This is the Activating Greatness podcast.
Hey, listen, that's why I wanted to have you on, is for you to ramble. There is so much good there. I have to make one comment about the tracking time. There's going to be a former boss of Alex at a couple of different stops that is listening to this and shaking their head because of how bad I was at being able to track in 15. And it was as if you were trying to put me in a corner, and I could not fathom that being a productive use of brain power. And so I'm so glad that you called that out.
And everybody knows it's bullshit. Like half of the agency, literally, when it was like, it's due by Friday. So guess what would happen Friday morning? Everybody's inventing a bunch of bullshit to fill in the time card.
Sent email, did
absurd.
Well,
it's absurd.
And I think it's so interesting because it goes against what so many leadership teams are asking for, which is, I need you to be more strategic. I need you to think differently. And then we're still putting teams into this box of 15-minute increments. And the other thing that you mentioned there that I want to double click on is the growing a remote team and being able to build with the right people in these seats. And also strategically grow, not just hiring to hire both internally, but then also bringing clients in. How has it been building with a different mission? Is it something that, you've seen, hey, being able to go in and explain this vision, someone either gets it or they don't get it, and it is an earlier qualifier or disqualifier, what has that been like trying to find those right people in the seats?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I guess the simplest way to say it is that I've basically, through communicating everything I know about PR, the good, the bad, the ugly, on platforms like LinkedIn, I've essentially flipped the model that traditional marketers use, which is they're always like hunting and trying to drum up business, and they're out there like trying to shake the trees for opportunities. And the same thing is true of people, like hiring recruiters to go out there and like find the right people, spending on getting some percentage of the people that you touch to come into your tent.
Yes.
I do none of that. I literally spend not a dime on recruiting, on marketing, and yet we're well into the 7 figures. And the reason for that is because people see in themselves the truths that I'm talking about out there every day. And so I have more candidates coming to me than I could possibly ever hire. And I'm talking at some of the most amazing positions at companies I could not possibly afford to hire these people, because they're like coming to me from Google and Apple and like all these places. And I'm like so flattered, but there's no way in hell you're going to take a 30% pay cut to come work at Crackle versus the Apple or Google you were just at. But the point is that they self-identify. They see in themselves what I'm talking about out there, and they as a result come knocking on my door. So the attraction piece has been really a blessing as it relates to just being out there, being a truth teller. All the people and all the clients come to me. They all self-identify as wanting to be a part of what we're talking about and what we're doing here. Yeah. And that has been the biggest epiphany to me from the earliest days on LinkedIn, where people would just say like, hey man, you and I are on the same page. We are simpatico. How do we make this relationship deeper? How do we work together? How do I work with you? And that's just something that I've never had the luxury of doing in my entire career, because I was always shaking the trees trying to find any opportunity that would come my way. So it's a bit of a jujitsu move, I suppose. And it's a little bit sort of counterintuitive to just be somebody who says the quiet shit out loud and have that translate into people wanting to be with you and work with you and partner with you.
Yeah, I think one of the concerns that I've seen on founders and CEOs who aren't interested in having a brand the way that you do, and also with marketing teams not wanting that out there, is kind of this, we're giving away the farm. And you are the exact opposite, where you talk about your principles, your strategy, how you would go about an opportunity. And that PR is not just, let's write a really, really bad press release because we have a new website that was launched. So I'm curious if you're willing to share, how does that also help? You mentioned the 75%. They've met you through your LinkedIn. They know what you're about. How does it also help when things are difficult in a client relationship and being able to retain them? Because you can go back and say, this is who we are. This is what we've always done. This is what we've preached. Is that creating a positive impact for you internally as well?
Yeah, well, so just as I kind of lay it all out there and try to share what's real and what's not online.
Yeah,
I'm who I am online.
All the time.
Same way I post about on LinkedIn is how we are in client engagement. So it's critical that in the earliest days of a relationship or potential relationship, that we are just crystal clear about what is possible and what is not. We wickedly underpromise and try to wickedly over-deliver. But anybody that hires us thinking we're going to be miracle makers in the first, couple of weeks, couple of months, they're out of their mind. And I'm going to say you came to the wrong place if you're hiring us thinking you're going to be in the Wall Street Journal every day, without putting a lot of work and sweat equity and relationship building and strategy around your narrative. Like we got to put skin in the game together here. But if we do that and we are consistent about that, then we will get you the results that you can possibly earn to the best of our power. And so no one is surprised. Like no one hires me and was like, you said you guys were going to do X, because we did no such thing. And people know me well enough to know that I would never do that. So when, to your point, if things get a little difficult or we're not getting any results for some reason, people tend to fall back on what they already know to be true, which is that this isn't a light switch. We are not a magic shop. It requires ammunition to go out there and do what we need to do together. And some of us are doing our best, and sometimes the other people are falling down. Maybe we're not getting what we need internally from them from a data perspective as quickly as we need it. How can we help you get us what we need to be successful. Maybe we fell into a lull where we were so used to just cranking out a steady diet of your announcements that we didn't stop for a second and remember to be enterprising to kind of fill in those gaps. Maybe that's on us. I don't know. But as partners, you work on that together, knowing that you're both coming at it from the right place and that no one's trying to be like, aha, you said. It's not that. We're not looking to be a vendor that, is hitting a quota. We're looking to be your partner.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. That's exactly where I was going, that level 4 partnership where you are a thought partner just as much as you are a task doer, right? You're not hiring Crackle to do one project. You're building a process and a partnership with you at the organizational level. So I love that. I do want to pivot to this line of questioning about leading differently. And at Velocity, we work with organizations, whether it's a startup, a Fortune 500, whether there's 15 people or 15,000 people. And a huge conversation is that people are requiring more in 2026, right? Whether it's Gen Z versus millennials versus different generations, how we talk about requesting time off, how we talk about, you mentioned bathroom breaks earlier, and I don't need to have you monitoring my every move. If I want to work at 8 p.m. and I still get the job done and doesn't impact the client, then I can work at 8 p.m. and do that. And so I'm curious, I'm allowed one bad podcast question every episode. I think this is going to be it. I haven't decided yet. I might ask you later.
Have a little faith.
Yeah. Listen, I always try to get one tough one in there or one bad one. I'm just curious, how has that been? What's the reception been like, not only internally, but in the peer-to-peer world of other founders, other leaders that you might be connected with? Because I do think it's needed. And as somebody who never wants to work in an office again and loves the remote flexibility, and I've found that I am a 15 times better employee in this construct than I was before.
Sure.
It's something that makes complete sense to me. Yet you have another conversation and it doesn't make sense. So how, are you having conversations about that, within your network? And, has there been pushback? Has there been pushback internally with your team? What is that like? And why are you so adamant about it on LinkedIn and with your team as well?
So I mentioned earlier that you get back what you put out into the world. And because I talk about our model and what we do and what we don't do, how we're remote, what our work sort of ethos is, we've attracted people that actually gravitate toward that. So the reaction among the people that work for us has been phenomenal, to the tune of almost no turnover. We are not a family. We all know we're not a family. I'm very clear about that to my team. But we're a good, strong community that has a lot of empathy and respect for each other. And we try our level best to not leave someone hanging and try to all row the same direction, because, hey, what's good for you is good for me. And that's kind of what I'm trying to create here. So from an internal standpoint, it's been phenomenal. And again, the retention is off the fucking charts relative to what the industry is, off the charts.
I love it.
And then from an external standpoint, it's really kind of mixed. I think there's a lot of people who are trying to start their own PR agencies or own consultancies. So I get those kind of people who are like, oh, how have you done X, Y, and Z? And aren't you worried about, why? And so I have those conversations, and it's really more like, how can I do what you're doing, which I really admire and I appreciate and I'm thankful for. Then I have the industry sort of stalwarts who are the legacy, deeply entrenched, often from big conglomerate agencies, who are it can't be all kumbaya, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And, they resent, I think, the fact that we have occupational liberty here, in the sense that we're able to kind of make our own terms and make our own lives a little bit better by having some flexibility. I think there's people that really resent that, actually. There's quite a few people who would actually prefer to do a 15-minute increment billing, because that is just what they were taught to do, and they think that that's the way it should be done, and there's really no daylight between the two approaches. So I'm a little bit of a, I guess, outsider in the industry that I helped build ultimately, because I'm speaking against some of the same shit I'm guilty of creating in the industry, but look, I think one of the truest measures of empathy is the ability to understand when maybe you didn't do something right and you maybe can do it better. And that's what I'm trying to get better at all the time, is learning just because we did all this stupid shit doesn't mean it's the right way, the most productive way, the most empathetic way, the most humane way. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that that's what we always did.
Right.
Maybe we can re-envision a world where we can be just as productive, retain our people, attract more talent, and have a lot of fun doing it. And that's what I'm striving to do.
There is no worse saying in any business at any point than, well, this is how we've always done it. The moment that I hear that, I know that there's a better way to do it, and we're just not willing to, or we're too comfortable with status quo, or whatever the reason is, but we end up getting stuck. And to your point, there's, whether it's the resistance to change, or they just genuinely think that they have to do it that way because that's how they were taught. They paid their dues that way. That's where these things continue. And I think, one of the things that we work a lot with teams is massive retention and burnout and turnover rates at their organization, especially in that audience that is 24 to 35 years old, who are coming out of college. Some graduated in the pandemic, or were going through school in the pandemic, and they had a different lens of what this would be, and the flexibility in the remote world. And it's not being matched. And within minutes, they're realizing, hey, maybe this isn't the right place for me. So a lot of interesting anecdotes there, but I'm going to pivot one more time for us here, because you also talk about we don't bring on clients that are assholes. And I've seen that on your LinkedIn. I've seen it on the Under Embargo podcast with you and Becca talking about it. And it's something that we talk a lot of times at Velocity about relationships, and relationships are the key to happiness personally and professionally. And yet, internally and externally, relationships are often where we go wrong, and we let things go too long. Maybe we have a top performer, but they are for lack of a better term, a cancer inside of the organization. And I know, as well as you do, I've got some examples of clients that have taken team members down the worst paths they've ever been on and eventually quit, specifically because we did not stop one client from running rampant. And so this kindness strategy and the staying power of being kind, how do you, as a leader, identify it in clients and in employees, but also how do you coach it? How do you teach it? Is that something that you invest in on a consistent basis? Or, is that just something that you've naturally built over the years?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter than the former, although I try to reinforce it. So when you talk about the people internally, so I keep coming back to the same thing, and I'll say it again and say hello, I'll buy on, is that you get back what you put out into the world. Yep. And all of the employees that I've got have come to me because they wanted to work at Crackle. And the reason why is in an ambient way. They're seeing the same messaging that I'm talking about over and over again, which is, life's too short to bend a knee to tyrants. Life's too short to work with brilliant assholes. Life's too short to tolerate the bad behavior of smart people. Because we've all been with people like that. They're brilliant. You'd hate to lose this guy or this woman, but you're like, God, they suck. I hate being around them. They suck the energy out of the room. Yep. And I don't want to even be in their midst. And that is a cancerous thing that slowly erodes at the camaraderie and the trust of an organization. It's just a fact. So internally, I've been saying these things for so long, and the people that have raised their hand and said, like, I like what you're saying, preach, I want to work with you. They are the good people that I have on my roster that continue to be on my roster because I recognize myself in what he's saying, and I want to be in an environment like that, like full stop. Yep. And then the other thing is reinforcing it in terms of like one of the hardest things you ever do is fire a client, especially one that's paying you really well, and especially during difficult times. The last client I fired was about a year and a half ago when the tech world just fell apart. And you probably recall this, where everybody was bleeding and losing clients everywhere. They stopped spending on PR. It was the worst ever. And I had this one client that we signed, and within, 3 weeks, it was clear that he didn't trust anything the team said. He was picking apart the writing of people who are like journalists on the team. And just was nitpicking and browbeating and bullying. And I had a conversation with him after it was brought to my attention. I was like, we can't have it this way. Let's figure out a way to work through this where my team doesn't feel like they're being berated every day. We need to quickly solve this. And he gave me the lip service that you would expect. And then 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, it just kept happening and happening and happening. And I had to make a difficult decision to say goodbye to the revenue we desperately needed at that time. I could not abide by somebody making my team feel like shit, because if I am not going to stand in the way of a guy bullying them, like, where's the trust in me? Like, what kind of a leader am I?
Yeah.
So difficult decision was made, and you'd think, sky is falling. But the funny thing has happened that, number one, the team was profoundly grateful that I had their back. And as a result of that, in the ensuing months and years, they've just gotten more loyal to the organization, more loyal to each other for supporting themselves during those difficult times. And our revenue has never been stronger. So you feel at the moment that the sky is falling, that you're never going to recover from these tough decisions. But I'm here to tell you, this too shall pass. Make the tough decision in the moment for your team. Stand up for them, or stand for absolutely nothing at all.
Yeah. Well, and the people are what make the business. And if you keep that client and revenue looks good for 3 months, but you lose 3 team members that are really valuable, and then that client eventually leaves because it sounds like they were going to be a problematic client regardless. Now we're down to 3 team members. And, I can speak to a firsthand experience 2 agencies ago where a client was going on a smear campaign on 3 of us internally. And we brought it to everybody and said, here's the situation. It's as bad as it can get. They don't listen. They do all this stuff. And they said, we got to keep working with them. And all 3 of us don't work there anymore. It was very clear. And neither does that organization. They're no longer a client either, because the next group came in and they did the same thing to the next group, and so on down the line. So
and that's what I was talking about earlier, was now that I have my own agency, I don't have to tolerate that shit. Whereas when I was, leading marketing for much larger firms, there would be times when I would be like, how in the hell are we keeping these guys around? But I get it. I mean, they were trying to make revenue and satisfy their stakeholders and shareholders and all that. I get all that. Yeah. But I don't have to make those decisions anymore. And if somebody gets mad, they're getting mad at me, and I can live with that.
Yes. Yeah. I love it. Okay. Last question here, and then I'm going to do 4 rapid fire questions, and we'll get you out of here. Parry, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time. I want to hear from you. All right. Our audience is mostly CEOs, executives that are, again, across industry. In today's world, why PR? What can PR offer to these leaders that are trying to grow the footprint of their business? Again, whether that's a Fortune 500 or it's somebody that's trying to make an impact and is scaling right now. Would love to have that answer from you, if you will.
I promised the audience that I did not give him this layup of a question. This was a question that he came up with, not me.
There's no outline.
I specifically said I don't want questions in advance.
Hey, maybe this is the bad podcast question, but I want it. I think more people need to hear this answer, because more people need to do PR the right way. So it was me who did it.
Yeah. So PR is about earned media versus paid, right? Mm-hmm. And earned media is where objective third-party individuals at the publications you read give a fair hearing to a client of ours and write what they really think about their products, their services, their people. So you're not looking at advertising. You're looking at real people evaluating the merits of a client and then writing what they actually see. So that's earned media. And earned media leads to trust. That's kind of the basic premise. But more specifically to today, in the age of AI, it used to be about SEO and Google and Bing and Yahoo, because you needed to appear on the first page of results or you were toast. Well, I don't know about you, but I spend very little time on those platforms now. And I spend most of my time on ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini, you name it, to find my information. We use some of that for, basic structural writing things, but we do most of our writing like human beings. But my point about the LLMs, or large language models, is that something like 82 to 86% of the answers delivered, or the citations delivered by those models, are drawing from earned media sources. Okay. So as people migrate away from SEO platforms like Google, they're increasingly getting their information from these LLMs, and LLMs are delivering answers something like 80 to 86% of the time pulled from the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, Reddit, trusted, credible, third-party validation And that's critically important, especially for the Fortune 500 and any company, but especially for the bigs. As Google wanes and the dominance and prominence of people looking for products and services is increasingly pinned on these platforms, you've got to be getting earned media on a very, very regular basis, because there's also a recency bias. Yeah. You can't just get a few articles and disappear, because they also look at the time these articles appeared and these conversations that are happening, all these trusted sources, when it occurs. So you can't be one and done. It's got to be an ongoing thing. So PR today is more critical than it has ever been. We're one of the very few industries that isn't getting completely gobbled up by AI, but in fact, AI threw us a bouquet in this regard.
Yep.
And hey, I'm grateful for it. Our team is growing. We're not reducing headcount. My biggest challenge right now is getting the bodies in fast enough. So that's what I would say. That's why.
Hey, listen, I love it. I'm glad I gave you the softball, because the AI is a hot button topic, even at Velocity, where we're talking about leadership, strategy, culture. Everybody's coming in. How is AI making an impact on this? And how can AI help us from a recruitment standpoint? And to your point, if I am using chat to help me find opportunities as well, we want to be appearing in there. And I love your thoughts on it. And the last thing I'll say before the 4 rapid fire questions, to go back to you put out what you get back in the world. Me asking you to be on this podcast started a long time ago with fantastic content from you. And I actually reached out over a year ago now about some of the content that you had. And I've got Democracy Dies in Darkness tattooed on my arm that I've had for, almost 15 years now. And it was something, seeing as a former journalist, seeing somebody at an organization similar into the world that I was in. I was more so on the marketing and sales side, but seeing somebody lead at that level who also had the beliefs that I had. It was one post that you see, and then next thing you know, I'm a massive advocate of everything that you're doing. And again, I think it's this piece of leading at the forefront and being who you are on LinkedIn, and then tying in this PR answer is, it's trust, it's credibility. And the more that you can do that, either through an own channel like a LinkedIn platform or through earned, the more successful you're going to be.
Great observations. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. 4 rapid fire questions that we ask every leader on the show. Number 1, what is one leadership habit that you do every day, no matter what?
This is probably going to rankle some people, but nap. I take at least a 20-minute nap every single day of my life, and I have zero apologies for it.
When? At what time? I'm so curious. I've not heard this one. Anytime? It's not the same thing each day.
It's whenever I'm like, sometimes it'll be like about an hour, half hour after lunch. I'm like, oh man, I could use 20 minutes to just like close my eyes, refresh, and get back at it. But it's not always that time. It could be at any given time in the day. And I tell my people, take a fucking nap if you need a nap. Like we're not running a daycare center here. I don't give a shit when you take a nap. Go for a walk, eat your lunch, just get the work done. Take a nap.
I love it. All right, question number 2. What is the most underrated skill that a leader needs today in 2026 to be successful?
Strong writing skills. The AI slop that we see from everyone across the board in all walks of life is so demoralizing, obvious, and soul-sucking that just by sheer dint of having quality writing skills, you will separate yourself from the pack in orders of magnitude. Anybody who is a writer can recognize real writing, and anybody who is not a writer thinks they're doing good writing with ChatGPT. Yeah. But here's a shock. The real leaders know what's what, and the real leaders can write.
Oh, I love it. All right, question number 3. What's one thing on the opposite end that great leaders need to stop doing?
I think fetishizing hustle culture.
Yes.
Like the broing it up of everything, like everything doesn't need to be an ice bath and up at 3 a.m. and doing scrimshaw by your journal at night. Like everybody doesn't need the same formula to be successful in life. Hence, hey, I take a nap and I'm still doing okay. There's not a formula that predicts greatness. Results beget quality results, and people get there all different ways. I'm somebody who has ADHD. I don't follow the typical playbook that everybody else does. I've got things that are, challenging for me as somebody who has that particular affliction, but I've also got, as Becca likes to say, a bit of a superpower in that I can excel in weird ways at weird times and do it in a weird way. So the fetishism about like get in the ice bath and run 50 miles and, read 17 books a day, like calm down. Everybody calm down with all these things. And it's boring and it's unoriginal, How about an original piece of advice? Like take a nap.
I love it. All right. Question number 4. Yeah. What's the best leadership advice you've ever received? And if it's take a nap, I'm going to have to double down on it. But what's the best leadership advice you've ever received?
Yeah, it's don't be afraid to fail. I've learned the most profound lessons by failing, far more so than I have by having easy and quick successes. If you've been reading me on LinkedIn, I've had kind of a hard Scrabble background and came from kind of humble beginnings and all of that. But because of that, I failed a shitload when I was young in every imaginable way. Yeah. And I think that the key there is realizing that we all have agency over our lives. And even when we do fail, we fall down 7 times, we stand back up 8. And I think that when you stand up that 8th time, you do it with a sense of purpose in your life and a sense of sort of accomplishment and a pride that you would never have unless you had failed before. So that's for me. Fail your ass off and do it early and do it often, because eventually those are going to be the most profound building blocks for your success.
Yeah, that is absolutely a snippet for LinkedIn. I love that answer. Parry, who is somebody, as we're wrapping up here, who's a leader that you believe is doing great things that we could learn a lot from? Who's somebody that we should interview next on the podcast? Well,
this is going to sound like a bouquet thrown to my lovely bride, but my wife's name is Mandy Mladenoff at work, Mandy Headrick at home. She is the president of a former company of mine called Matter Communications. Mm-hmm. She's been in this space for just as long as I have, and I've never seen a woman with her leadership skills, ability to nurture, ability to make tough decisions, and yet have everybody that's ever come across her path like love her to death, even the people she's fired. So I don't know how you do that, but she is somebody that is worth your time.
Well, I love it. Usually I have to send a really great email and send the video, but maybe I'll just have you let her know. And I'll send the video to let her know that you were hyping her up at the end. So we can coordinate that. Sounds like exactly the type of leader we'd want to have. Parry, thank you so much for investing, 40 minutes. I think this was exactly why I wanted to have you on the show and exactly what we're trying to build with the Activating Greatness podcast, showcasing leadership in a different perspective and showing that, to your point, it comes in all shapes and sizes from all different backgrounds. And I've got a feeling there are a lot of people who are listening to this that are going to follow you on LinkedIn and see that how you've been for the last 40 minutes is how you are every day on that platform. And for those of you that are also listening and thinking, hey, that PR question, that actually sounded pretty nice, and I would like more trust built in our organization, absolutely reach out to Parry and the Crackle team, because I think they'll get you right on that side of the world. Parry, any final thoughts before I let you go here?
No, but I guess the only final thought I would say is let's all work together as business leaders to call out bad shit in the world when we see it, like ice in Minneapolis right now. That stuff has got to end, and we need more people like me that are willing to go on record and say it, because the time is now.
Let's be better. Let's be better. Absolutely. All right, Parry, thank you so much, and thank you for listening.